Welcome back, everyone. It's Eric from Rare Candy here. Today we are back kicking off our very first Darkness Ablaze deck profile on the channel, and kicking things off with a pretty appropriate one, probably one of the more hype decks to come out of this set. That is going to be Eternatus VMAX. And this deck in particular was chosen for us to be covered by one of our Patron GX members, Chris Campbell, over at patreon.com/rarecandytcg. So depending on how much our patrons decide to pledge, one of the perks is they actually get to choose topics for us to cover on the channel, and Chris really wanted to see us do Eternatus, so definitely want to prioritize doing this one first before some of the other ones. So I'll have a link down below in the description if you want to learn about that, and also down below in the description, not sure when exactly, but there should be a live match featuring this deck in action as well. That'll be posted in the coming days, so I'll have a link down below whenever that goes live too. But let's get into the actual deck profile itself. Eternatus VMAX is kind of like the new school version of the old Mega Rayquaza deck, and to kick things off we have 4 copies of the base form Eternatus V. So Eternatus, not too much really important to say about, 220 HP basic Pokemon, but its first attack is actually kind of decent. Just for a Dark Energy, you do 30 and you attach a Dark Energy out of your discard pile. So, you know, it's okay. It's kind of like the old Oblivion Wing attack we used to have on the XY Veltal. Sometimes the 30 damage can be kind of relevant. You know, Eternatus caps out at 270, so sometimes we need some ways that, you know, getting over that 300 HP hump, and sometimes getting in that chip damage can help. We're not playing it for its second attack. But going on to the main attacker of the deck, we have 4 copies of Eternatus VMAX. So one of the most typed new cards out of Darkness Ablaze. And so, like I said, this is kind of like the old Mega Rayquaza has this ability, which is basically Sky Field. You can have up to 8 bench Pokemon, but they can only be dark Pokemon. And so, of course, whenever that changes, you have to discard down to 5. But yeah, it's kind of cool. We have the old Sky Field built right into the ability of this card here. And you can probably guess the attack as well if you're familiar with Mega Rayquaza. For a dark and colorless, does 30 times the amount of dark Pokemon you have in play. So if you count all of your bench and you're active, you're going to cap out at 270, which is pretty insane just for 2 energy. You know, some of the other VMAXs that we have in the format take 3 and 4 energy just to hit a similar amount of damage. So this is pretty nuts. So this is what the entire deck is built around. We can easily make quick work of tag teams in the format, but we do play a number of ways to try to scale over that 270 cap and try to maybe even get some one-shots on some opposing Pokemon VMAX that are running around out there as well. Going on, we have 4 copies of the new Crobat V as well. Definitely a very important new card from Darkness Ablaze. Kind of like the old Shaman from back in the day, going along with the Mega Rayquaza sort of theme. But Crobat here, it has this ability, whenever you bench it, you draw until you have 6 cards in your hand, but much like with something like Dedenne, you can't use more than one of these abilities per turn. So not quite as fast as the old Mega Ray deck, but still the same core concept. Crobat also does have an attack. Its dark color is 70, and I believe they are poison. Nothing too special, but you know, it's something. It's not nothing. So every turn we want to ideally use Crobat V, get another bench Pokemon down just to do more damage, and also draw more cards in the process. Going on from there, we have 4 copies of Galarian Zigzagoon. So this is going to be our main damage modifier that we have in the deck. Of course, it has this ability, whenever we bench it from hand, we can put 1 damage counter on one of our opponent's Pokemon. So we need bench sitters in this deck, and Zigzagoon is by far one of the best ones that Dark type has, because we can augment our damage output in the process. It's basically kind of like a plus 40 every time you play it, because it adds 30 damage for your Eternatus and also gives you 1 more damage counter to play with in the process. So, you know, Zigzagoon gets a lot more valuable in a deck like this than I think your average deck that might run it. But like I said, this is going to be one of the ways we can hit above that 300 mark. Hitting 280 is something that's important too, because we cap out 270. Zigzagoon will allow us to put 10 damage counters, or I'm sorry, 10 damage or 1 damage counter on something like an Arceus Palkia to be able to one-shot that, so that's important. But between these and scoop ups, we can actually reuse these and hit for some pretty insane damage output with this deck. So going on from there, not too many other Pokemon to cover, but we do have 1 copy of the new Hoopa from Darkness Ablaze here. So it's a basic Pokemon, has just 1 attack here for a Dark Energy. It can only be used if it came from your bench into the active spot and does 90 damage. So it's kind of like Zapdos in that way, but there's no base damage. It's just you're either doing 0 or you're doing 90 with this thing. So this can sometimes be nice. It's an easy way to maybe take a cheap prize on something like a Jirachi or a opposing Zigzagoon or something else like that in the early game. Also can sometimes be nice to clean up some of your two-shots if you do have to two-shot stuff. And it only gets 1 prize in the process, so that's nice. And then from there, we also have 1 copy of the other Hoopa from Unified Mind. So the reason we're playing this is for that first attack, Evil Admonition does 10 plus 20 more for each more of your Pokemon, your opponent's Pokemon that have abilities that are in play. Then I believe the other attack is just 80 and goes through resistance. Yeah, so weakness and resistance. So nothing too impactful in the second attack, but the first attack in particular is actually going to be for the mirror match. That's one of the big, I think, uses that this card has, is you can hit for some insane damage on opposing Eternatus and or whatever else they might have in the active spot, because if they have a full bench of 8 Pokemon and they're active, almost everything in this deck has an ability. So this is definitely going to be an easy way to maybe take free 2 prizes on a Crobat V, or maybe soften up an Eternatus while only giving up 1 prize in the process. But also, Hoop is just kind of generally useful in other stuff too. A lot of things in the format have abilities like Dedenne, the new Crobat, Eldegoss, Jirachi. So Hoopa can just be a nice sort of like 1 prizer to get in some chip damage with. But like I said, more so for the mirror match. That's the main reason I'm choosing to include it right now. So that's going to be the Pokemon line, guys. We're not playing Weavile or anything like that. We're going pretty much straight consistency with this thing, all basics other than our 4 Eternatus VMAX we have. But going on to our supporter cards, we have 4 copies of Professor's Research. Of course, just a nice discard our hand and draw 7. You know, we're largely an all basic deck outside of our VMAXs. So usually there's not too many moving pieces we really want to discard with this deck. Up next from there, we have 3 copies of Marnie. So Marnie is just another way we can draw some cards in the process. So we get to shuffle our hand, put the bottom of our deck, we get 5, our opponent gets 4. Not really too much else to say about it. We're not playing Reset Stamp in this list, so I wanted to have some copies of Marnie here instead at the least. And then from there, we have 3 copies of Boss's Orders as well. So Boss's Orders, pretty self-explanatory. We can choose what we want to take knockouts on. And one thing I do like about this deck in particular is the fact that we have this heavy Crobat V engine. So one of the big downsides to Boss's Orders usually is that it's your supporter and you can't play something like a Research afterwards to keep drawing cards. But since we have so much non-supporter based draw, it's actually really not that bad. A lot of turns we can afford to take a turn off and play Boss's Orders. And so right now I have 3 of these. You could opt to cut 1 for a Great Catcher. But like I said, since I think a lot of turns we can afford to take this extra turn off of not playing a draw supporter, that's why I'm opting just for the straight 3 copies of Boss's Orders, but feel free to play around with that. Maybe a copy of Great Catcher could be worth considering. Up next from there, though, we have 1 copy of Black Market Prism Star. That's going to be our only stadium that we have in the deck. So, of course, Black Market, when one of our Dark Pokemon with Dark Energy attached get knocked out, they give up 1 less prize, and also our opponents too if they are playing Dark Pokemon in Energy. So that's just nice, turning our Eternatus into a 2 prizer instead of a 3 prizer potentially. So that's why we are playing that, and we do play some ways at countering other stadiums as well in the list. So if we do run to a Chaotic Swell, we will have an out to still get our Black Market in play. So going on to our items, we have 4 copies of Scoop Up Net. Scoop Up Net, of course. We can put one of our non-Pokemon V or GX back into our hand. Discard the other cards attached to it, of course. So this is mainly just to increase our damage output with Zigzagoon. Now, of course, this can be a retreating method for Hoopa and Zigzagoon both, but this is mainly just to keep reusing Zigzagoon and do more and more damage in the process. Scoop Up Net is also kind of cool because it makes our Pokemon communications in the deck live more often than not. Because if we have like a Zigzagoon or a Hoopa on the bench but nothing in hand, we can Scoop Up Net, then calm that away for a Crobat, you know, Eternatus, whoever it might be. But like I said, primary use is to reuse those Zigzagoons to be able to get more damage counters on the field. Up next from there, we have 2 copies of Switch in the deck. And then we also have 2 copies of Air Balloon. So a lot of switching methods we have here. I wanted Air Balloon in here instead of something like the Hide Darkness Energy that's coming out in this set. Just because if I need to retreat a Crobat as an example, you know, Air Balloon's going to allow me to do that a little bit more consistently. I don't really want to have to attach a special Dark to Crobat just to give it free retreat. I'd rather just be able to put down something like Air Balloon. Going on from there, though, we have 3 copies of the new Turbo Patch. So I'm playing this instead of like the Weavile GX engine or anything, or Hydreigon or anything like that. Just because this deck really doesn't need too many energies to function properly. Really, as long as I think you get one of these, maybe 2 of these to work in a game, you're good. Just because if your only Pokemon with any energy goes down, you are going to need a way to cheat some extra energy into play. But Turbo Patch, if you guys aren't familiar with it, it's kind of like the other patch and Metal Saucer cards we've had in the past, but it's on a coin flip. You flip a coin of heads, you attach any basic energy from discard to one of your benched basic Pokemon. We do need to make sure that we use this before evolving into our VMAX, but nevertheless, really not too big of a headache, I don't think. And like I said, as long as like one of these goes off in a game, that's really all we need, I think, to ensure we always have a Pokemon to attack with. Up next from there, though, we have 1 copy of Dangerous Drill as well. So Dangerous Drill, this is the card I mentioned that can potentially bump Chaotic Swell, but you discard a Dark Pokemon from hand, and then you discard a tool card, Stadium, and I believe Special Energy is one of the other ones. Yeah, so it's a tool, energy, or a Stadium card, which is kind of nice. So if we do run to a deck with Chaotic Swell, we can maybe discard an extra Hoopa or whatever it might be, discard that, play down our black market, but also we can still get rid of other things like opposing air balloons, or whatever tool cards that might be running around, or maybe opposing special dark energies or speed lightnings. So Dangerous Drill actually seems like it kind of has a home finally, since every Pokemon in the deck is going to be dark. Going on from there, we have 4 copies of Quick Ball. Pretty self-explanatory, staple in basically every deck. Quick Ball especially is super good because so many of our basic Pokemon have these strong coming into play abilities like Crobat and Zigzagoon. But we're still playing some other search cards. We have 3 copies of Great Ball from there. So Great Ball, we look at the top 7 cards of our deck. We pick a Pokemon we find there, put it into our hand. So by and large, basically any Pokemon we draw into is going to be something we want to see. So not only can this help us find our basics, but unlike Quick Ball, we can actually find our Eternatus VMAX with Great Ball as well. That's one upside to it. And kind of for the same reason, we are choosing to play 3 copies of Pokemon Communication as well. So Communication is just another search card we have, but again, unlike Quick Ball, we can potentially grab our VMAXs. So of course we put a Pokemon from hand back into our deck and get a different one. And like I mentioned too, with Scoop Up Net, we can potentially reuse Zigzagoons or Hoopas to put back into the deck with our Communications as well. So from there, we have 2 copies of the new Capture Energy, or I guess a recent card. It's not super new at this point, but came out back in Rebel Clash. Pretty cool special energy that I really like in this deck so far. It's a colorless energy, but whenever you attach it to one of your Pokemon, you search your deck for a basic and put it on your bench. So not only does this power up your attacks, but it effectively reads plus 30 damage as well, which is really, really cool. So we can grab a second Eternatus, or maybe just get a Hoopa down on the bench, whatever it might be. You could play the Special Dark if you want to, but if I'm playing any special energies, like if we're going to dig into our Turbo Patch consistency, I think this is the special energy I would prefer if sort of given the choice. So we don't really want to run too many of these though, just because Eternatus attacks for a dark and a colorless. You don't really want to have an instance where you have like 4 of these in your hand or something like that. That would be awful. So I think the 2 count is sort of the sweet spot that I've found with this deck. But we still need some basic energy. So we have 2, 4, 6, 7 copies of Dark Energy to round out the list here. So guys, that is going to be our initial draft of the Eternatus VMAX deck. I have to say, I've really been enjoying this deck a lot. As you can see, it's really consistent. It's pretty bare bones. I'm not playing anything too crazy in terms of techs. I think the like the Hoopas are sort of the only sort of techie things, or maybe even the Dangerous Drill. But by and large, we're just going for straight consistency, trying to hit hard, hit fast with this thing. But there are still a lot of other cards I have been sort of pondering and trying out in my different iterations of this deck. And actually, our Stage 2 patrons and higher at patreon.com/rarecandytcg actually have access to a bonus article detailing some of those different techs and deck building options that I've been considering going forward. So I'll have a link down below in the description if you guys want to learn more about that content. But definitely stay tuned to the channel, guys. We have plenty more Darkness Ablaze coverage coming up, including, like I said, a match showing off this deck in action. Hit that bell to stay notified whenever we do post this new content. But with that being said, I hope you guys did enjoy this video today. As usual, like and subscribe, and consider supporting this channel as well by becoming a patron over at patreon.com/rarecandytcg, or by picking up some merch from our online store, rarecandytcg.com. But as always, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.